In a time full of yearly blockbuster game releases from huge publishers such as EA and Activision, making a game as an independent video game studio is a daunting task, and seeing it become a mainstream phenomenon proves to be elusive for many game studios. But the game Cuphead, released by Studio MDHR, successfully achieved both of these milestones. Cuphead's path to success proved to be one filled with delays and challenges. The game's development began in 2010, with the first demo of the game being shown at E3 2014. Despite being only 40% complete at the time of the conference, Cuphead enamored audiences with its beautiful art style and engaging gameplay. Despite being slated for release later in the year, Cuphead ended up experiencing numerous delays, and the game only saw release on September 29, 2017 for the Xbox One and PC. You may be asking why any game would take almost 8 years to complete. Some games that take this long are crippled by issues in development, but Cuphead was not one of these games. The reason for Cuphead's development time was that every frame, and I mean every frame, of this game was hand-drawn and animated. The Cuphead art style that the gaming world fell in love with is inspired by animation from the Walt Disney and Fleischer Studios era in the early 1900s, where fluid movements and larger-than-life characters create a fantastical and psychedelic atmosphere. The game is a love letter to this bygone era of cartoons, often directly paying homage to shorts from the time. Before I dive into the specifics of the game, I feel it's important to explore how and why Cuphead became as successful as it did. The modern gaming industry has become somewhat of a paradox. Despite massive companies releasing yearly updates to games that go on to earn billions of dollars every year, gaming culture as a whole has shifted away from genuinely appreciating these types of games. Most games that go on to become a cultural phenomenon are made by independent developers or studios. This trend can be seen with games that came before Cuphead, such as Toby Fox's Undertale and Scott Cawthon's Five Nights at Freddy's series, both of which have garnered an enormous fanbase that continues to stay engaged with the game years after release. The Canadian studio MDHR, created by the brothers Chad and Jared Moldenhauer, made full use of this trend. But trendiness can't be the only reason why Cuphead went on to become as successful as it did. On closer inspection, there are other factors that contributed to its success. The second reason, and the most directly obvious one, is the uniqueness of the game. No other game has been done completely in an old-school cartoon style, complete with music that matches the time period. It is incredibly rare to find a game with this much effort put into every area of the game. Observing the behind-the-scenes clips of the game shows that animation was done in traditional frame-by-frame method by a team of animators, and the audio was done by a live ensemble that lent an air of authenticity to the game. Even subtle details like the film grain that appears throughout the game help create an experience that no other game can replicate. The final reason the game became as successful as it did was its pricing structure. From the beginning, Studio MDHR knew exactly who their audience was. Cuphead was not targeted at the casual consumer who plays games on their phone. It was targeted at hardcore gamers that could handle the difficulty of the game. Thus, they knew that implementing microtransactions or paid chapters would be a huge mistake, as this category of gamer is fundamentally opposed to the idea. If you don't believe me, go to any forum that discusses the EA game Star Wars Battlefront. By implementing a single flat fee for the game, Studio MDHR appealed to the sensibilities of their target audience and created a pricing structure that many found reasonable and justifiable. As a two-dimensional side-scrolling game, Cuphead is played from a third-person perspective. It falls under the category of an action game under Lindsay Grace's game types, with some minor elements of adventure and RPG games mixed in. In particular, the world exploration component and the various upgrade paths the player is presented with. Our two protagonists, Cuphead and his brother Mugman, are forced to go on their mission after Cuphead gets overconfident at a casino, causing him to make a deal with the devil, which would cost the souls of him and Mugman. The devil offers a way out, however. For the brothers to have their souls spared, they must collect the soul contracts of all the bosses in the game who have previously sold their soul to the devil. And so begins the story of Cuphead. When starting the game, Cuphead feels immediately different compared to other side-scrolling games. It's what some in the gaming community refer to as a boss rush. Unlike a traditional side-scroller, such as the games in the Super Mario Bros. Series where traversing the level is the challenge, Cuphead's challenge comes from levels that are only boss battles. That's not to say Cuphead is entirely devoid of typical side-scroller levels, which are referred to as run-and-gun levels in the game. It's just that they are not the main focus. There are a total of 5 run-and-gun stages, but over 20 bosses to fight over the course of your adventure. Cuphead is almost universally loved by its fans. As one of the few games on Steam with a 10 out of 10 rating, it is clear that Cuphead has elements that make it appealing to an incredibly large audience. By analyzing the gamer motivation model, the reason why becomes self-evident. The three categories of gamer that Cuphead most appeals to are action, mastery, and achievement type gamers. Under the subcategories of action, destruction and excitement are present in spades throughout the game. Cuphead presents numerous obstacles for players to face in boss battles and run-and-gun stages, with chaotic enemies and projectiles surrounding the player relentlessly. The game requires inch-perfect precision to beat most levels, and never fails to surprise the player using new mechanics and enemies. For the achievement type gamer, Cuphead has a lot to offer. The Steam achievements are incredibly difficult to complete. It took me nearly 1 month to successfully get all of them, and I was playing the game a lot during that month. Most of the achievements in Cuphead come from the level ranking system, which evaluates the player on a set of criteria and gives them a set letter grade for it. While Cuphead rewards you for beating the game with 100% ranking, the game requires you to get a high letter grade on these levels to get that coveted 200% completion. In-game coins provide you with the opportunity to upgrade your character as well, giving new super attacks and projectile weapons, which I will be covering later on in this video. The final type of gamer, the mastery type, is most likely who this game was targeted at. If you are a mastery type gamer, you absolutely must play Cuphead, and I don't mean that lightly. The two subcategories of mastery, strategy and challenge, are such key elements to Cuphead that the game has garnered a reputation for it. Strategy in boss fights is critical, with the game requiring trial and error to find patterns, character loadouts, and weak points to successfully beat the bosses. But challenge is where Cuphead really excels. While earning the semi-ironic title of the Dark Souls of platformers. Man, that just hurts to say. The truth of the matter is, Cuphead is brutally difficult. It's for the gamer that is so motivated to overcome challenges that they will literally spend hours dying to the same boss over and over again, only to come back after finishing the game and do it all over on expert difficulty, just so they could say they could. Cuphead actively encourages this behavior with the progress bar, where, upon death, the game tells you how close you were to beating the boss.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
While Cuphead has been called too difficult to be enjoyable by some game journalists, the vast majority of the player base enjoys the difficulty, making this one of the most appealing traits of the game for many. Cuphead has a lot more operational rules than your traditional 2D shoot-'em-up. Right off the bat, I want to make clear that despite having the option to play with the keyboard and remap control buttons to any key, it is a terrible idea to try playing this game without a controller. The fast reflexes and precision needed just isn't present with the keyboard setup. With the use of a controller, it becomes a lot easier to play the game. The operational rules of the game allow Cuphead to run, jump, crouch, and dash, which are traditional controls for a side-scroller. However, Cuphead also adds the option of shooting, which opens up a variety of controls surrounding that action. In addition to the shoot button, there are also buttons that allow you to switch between the two projectile weapons you can have in your loadout, or lock you in place while shooting. In addition to this, Cuphead also has the ability to shoot in one of 8 directions at any time, and use a super move through a button press. This ability is visually represented on screen as a card. When one of these cards flips, you're allowed to use a super move. However, if you choose to wait for all 5 cards to flip, you can utilize one of 3 special abilities, launching a powerful beam, invincibility for a short period of time, or spawning a ghost double that deals damage as long as you keep him on screen. Side note though, you do need to unlock these abilities as you progress through the game. They aren't unlocked right away. Pairing is another key component which deserves its own mention as a separate control. It's activated by a well-timed press of the jump button on an object, but only has an effect on pink objects. Pink objects can also parry other pink objects, something which can work to your benefit or against it, depending on the situation. A successful parry also has a benefit of charging up your super meter by 1 card. In this way, chaining parries together can be an excellent way to take down a boss quickly. There is another situation where controls differ slightly, however. Airplane stages, where Cuphead flies in an airplane to take down a boss. In these, our porcelain protagonist can't run, jump, or crouch for obvious reasons. However, being in the air offers Cuphead omnidirectional movement. The ability to dash is replaced by the ability to shrink at will as long as you hold the button down. The weapon loadout is also skipped over in favor of a basic machine gun, with an option to shoot high damage heavy bombs with a push of a button. Pairing works the same as in non-airplane stages. The general UI of the game doesn't differ between side-scroller and airplane stages. In addition to the super meter at the bottom left, Cuphead's hit points are also shown to the left of the super meter. Their function is straightforward. They indicate how many hits Cuphead can take before he dies. Certain equipable power-ups can increase it from its base 3 in exchange for dealing less damage. Cuphead also offers a multiplayer co-op option where a second player can play as Mugman, with the controls being exactly the same for the second player. They can equip their own loadouts and have their own health bar and super meter. However, instead of appearing on the bottom left, they appear on the bottom right. The only gameplay differences are that either player can revive the other by parrying them, and can give extra hit points to the other player if they deem it necessary through a button press. The game has a few non-player characters that Cuphead or Mugman can interact with. They often benefit the player in some way, whether that be directly or by providing clues to acquire something in the game. These can range from coins, which are the currency used to buy weapons and power-ups in the game, or alternate audio-visual modes to make the game look and sound different. The player can manually change the attributes of Cuphead and Mugman by opening a menu that allows you to select a loadout for the character. This loadout has a total of 4 slots. The first 2 slots are for projectile weapons, with there being 6 choices. Pea Shooter, which is the standard weapon you get at the beginning of the game, Spread, which shoots a spray of bullets in 5 different directions, Chaser, which uses bullets that home into the weak spot of enemies, Lobber, a high damage projectile with low range, Roundabout, which shoots high damage projectiles which loop around backwards, and Charge, which shoots a very powerful shot but needs to be charged to be effective. The next available slot is for a power-up, or a charm as it's called in the game. Once again, there are 6 of these. Heart, which adds an extra hit point of health in exchange for doing lower damage. Pea Sugar, which automatically parries objects without needing to use the jump button again. Smoke Bomb, which makes you invincible while dashing. Whetstone, which makes your parries do damage on any enemy, not just pink ones. Coffee, which makes your super meter increase at a constant rate without doing anything. And Twin Heart, which gives you 2 extra hit points but lowers your damage considerably. All of these charms and weapons can be brought from the shop in-game, Porkrind's Emporium. The next slot is for the previously mentioned special abilities, or super arts as they're known in the game. These consist of Energy Beam, which is a powerful screen-spanning attack, Invincibility, which prevents the player from taking damage for 5 seconds, and Giant Ghost, which spawns a massive ghost on screen that deals damage as long as the player keeps it on screen. There is another super which is unique to the airplane levels called Super Bomb Morph. It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like, and it's really effective for dealing massive damage in a large radius. If it isn't immediately obvious, I absolutely loved Cuphead as a game. Its endearing art style, brilliant soundtrack, and engaging gameplay has made it one of my all-time favorite games. It is rare in this day and age to see a game that has so much care and consideration put into it. No corners were cut anywhere, making this game astoundingly polished from an audio and visual perspective. As an achievement and mastery type of gamer, Cuphead managed to provide me a level of challenge I rarely saw in the gaming world that kept me coming back for more. Other than a few minor gripes, such as the keyboard control scheme and occasional glitch, Cuphead is an absolute masterpiece of a game in every sense of the word. With the new DLC, The Delicious Last Course, due out on June 23, 2019, I'm sure that Cuphead will continue to delight its fanbase for years to come.